Last night, amidst what seemed to be an ever-changing story, we affirmed the fundamental importance of the presumption of innocence. As the day began yesterday, the allegations against the unnamed BBC presenter seemed to reach breaking point. But next we heard that the individual in question, the alleged victim, was denying the allegations of inappropriate behaviour by his lawyer. Then, The Sun claims to be standing by the parents of the individual and published quotes stating, "It is sad, but we stand by our account and we hope they get the help they need." We did this to help, and the presenter has got into their head, their being the individual who would otherwise be called the victim. But then today, when things seem to be entering into no man's land, fresh allegations of misconduct emerged against the very same presenter from yet another young person, including being pressured to meet as well as sending abusive messages. It's worth noting that The Sun is yet to publish the evidence that it says it has. So it's an unusually difficult topic for the commercial success that is sit down with Sitwell. But William, you yourself were once a victim of trial by media, and you found that there was a Twitter storm. I think I was one of the very few people to defend you, which probably didn't do you much good.
It certainly didn't, but thank you.
Trial by media is a pretty unpleasant aspect of modern social media, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I thought we lived in a fairly libertarian society these days where you can specify your gender, your sexual proclivities are up to you. And I think that I found the Philip Schofield affair incredibly uncomfortable because, as far as I know, and I still haven't seen anyone accuse him of an actual crime. And just because you might not approve of someone's behaviour, it doesn't mean that their reputation has to be completely trashed. And this individual at the BBC seems to be on the same vein as this. And you get Twitter behaving appallingly. I think it's really interesting that people like Jeremy Vine and Nicky Campbell and Rylan are calling out the people who have tried to name them. And the vitriol that they get is appalling. Twitter, Instagram, if you ever suffered from abuse on those platforms, and I have, you try and complain about it. It goes absolutely nowhere. They either don't care about it, or they simply can't control the beast. And so what happens is people's reputation gets completely destroyed before they're able to stand up and defend themselves. And what often happens is when we see the truth of the story, when it starts to unravel, we actually realise that the supposition of criminal behaviour or the attitudes that people have about these people ends up being wrong because the truth is in a very different place.
The Twitter users, they have to be careful because if they put things on that aren't true, and Jeremy Vine has threatened to sue, the people accused who aren't the person involved can sue. And this happened to Sally Bercow. She lost a libel action and had to pay significant amounts of money in settlement. So it can be very expensive to tweet something when you don't know the facts.
Yes, and these people are incredibly naive. You know, just because you're sort of sitting in your sweaty flat abusing celebrities and you think you can get away with it. In the old days, we sat at the television and shouted at it, and it didn't go further than our sitting rooms.
Right. Fortunately, GB News viewers are far too civilised to do any of these things and are well behaved. But I think you've touched on a very interesting thing, that the fact we don't know the name has actually made the story bigger and bigger and bigger. And I do sometimes wonder, if we weren't applying these invented privacy laws and The Sun had published the name last week, it would have given the person involved the chance to respond. Other newspapers would have been much more careful of piling in because of the libel laws. The Sun would have had to have taken on the risk of a libel action if it were wrong. It gives somebody accused a much better chance than a Twitter furore about something that people just don't know the facts about.
Yes, it strikes me that, The Sun is behaving in the way that it did in the 80s, as a red top, trying to drag people down and expose people in a way that I think is rather old-fashioned, to put it mildly. And I think, obviously, as you suggest, the mystery that surrounds this person is what's made it so exciting. The guessing game is what's made it such, a dramatic story to follow.
Well, the Prime Minister on a visit to NATO is asked if he knows who the person is and says he doesn't. That if it gets to that level, it's clearly something that everybody is talking about. But I'm also interested in the point you make, that it may turn out that nothing illegal has happened, and it's very unclear from the current stories whether anything illegal has or hasn't happened. But is it right to say that public figures can do anything as long as it's legal? Or are viewers, listeners, readers of newspapers entitled to say, well, he may be allowed to do that, but actually I think that's pretty disagreeable?
I think it depends on whether you signed up to a particular code of conduct. I think that if an MP stands on a ticket of being a family man, and that classic shot of the Member of Parliament standing by the garden gate with his faithful wife and children, and it's then revealed that he has numerous mistresses and different families, I think it's absolutely right. I also think that if you choose to go into public life, and I know this is a view that you have, that you need to take the flack that goes with that. And I think that if you are a key national broadcaster, then perhaps there's a certain decorum. But the problem is, it's got to be written in stone, because there are too many grey areas here. Who's to say that one individual can join, dating apps and do what they want to do?
Isn't the nation entitled to come to a view, and isn't it to some extent about power? And that the issue the BBC has in handling this with the Jimmy Savile affair is that people with great power as national figures abused it with the BBC behind them and covering up. And that's what makes it a story of national interest, even if no crime has been committed.
I mean, reading between the lines of this individual, I don't sense a huge abuse of power. The latest revelations I've read carefully are about some activity on a dating app. Dating apps are there for people to meet. The characters said that they don't want to meet this individual. That character then said, right, well, I shall go to the press and say, and announce your name, and that person's then got cross about it. So I really don't see that develops the story in a particular way.
Well, it may not surprise you to know that I've never used a dating app in my life. I wouldn't know where to find one. But thank you, William. I understand you've got a bicycle ride to get your dinner, so I hope you cycle safely through the streets of London.